Hello, and welcome back to another segment of Tarot and Neurodivergence, where I never quite know exactly where we're gonna land and end up with these, but here we are again with a topic that, I don't know, I'm just feeling like it will be helpful for me to get out words out loud to you all as I'm sort of working through this topic, which you will know from the title. I would like to talk about today the grief that often comes with late diagnosis. And so I guess for I don't know, just general information reference, question mark, I am now 4, maybe 5 years into ADHD late diagnosis, and about 2 years now since the idea of also autism has come up with me and my doctors. So it feels like that one is a bit more of a self-diagnosis for now, but I like to call it, here's my term, I like to say soft launch diagnosis, because it is something that has been brought up to me by two different doctors now without me asking. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like, not that I think it matters either way, but I guess for the transparency and like, I think perhaps to give some background to my thought process around it is like, I wasn't really the one like totally thinking it. I think I'd seen some things online. I'm like, oh, I connect with that, but you know, there's a lot of overlap between ADHD and autism, so I'm sure like that's just it. Most likely not the case, because it was brought up to me again by two doctors who were like, okay, but like this, and this, not really an overlap. Yeah, so anyway, that's the status of the journey. And I think that to say that even though, you know, I've got years under my belt now of this late diagnosis, that these kinds of feelings and topics still come up. And I have a feeling it will be quite a long time. If I say if ever, I don't mean that to sound so doom and gloom, but I think this is something that I will be processing forever, because I don't know, I think probably a lot of reasons. Part of me thinks that a sense of self is such an abstract idea, which I know I already struggle with very abstract ideas. So I think that plays a big part in it, honestly, where it's like, I feel like my grieving over a sense of self also comes from a place of like, I've never thought about this before, and like, can someone tell me exactly what a sense of self is? And there's not really a solid definition for that. So anyway, again, there's never a direction with these. I'm just talking, so if I take some long pauses, I'm just trying to get my thoughts together. But I guess where we can start, because again, when I make these videos, this is a tarot channel. Not to say that I can't do whatever I want, because I can. But I do. This is my interest. That has never changed, or you know, since it began, it has not changed. And so I love to connect everything to cards. So let's start with what really made me want to talk about this today, because this has been something that I think, or a feeling that has been coming up again more intensely over the last few weeks. But I've been pulling a card of the week every week, and I've been using a certain deck for the last few weeks because I knew this is the feeling I've been having, and the card I pulled this week was like, okay, no, we gotta dig into this, we gotta explore this. And we'll start with the deck. It is I have it in this beautiful Peggy bag. It's Into the Lonely Woods Oracle. Now this is one that probably in a lot of other tarot and neurodivergence videos, I've brought this up because this is a grief work deck. And I am using this in that context right now. But the way a lot of the cards, what a lot of the cards are and how it's written, this deck has always felt to me like a finding a sense of self deck, and I think there is absolutely this like grief undercurrent. I feel like I'm doing this because it's like this feeling I get here of sadness, I guess, but I don't think I would call it sadness. I'm not quite sure what to call it, but when you feel it here. This video might include a lot of me trying to explain emotions, which also not spectacular at. I'm not really good at putting words to my emotions. It's easier for me to explain how it feels, so I'm hoping you're catching my drift there. Anyway, so I've used this deck for quite a long time in this way, where I guess for me personally, and this could be a factor of, gosh, isn't it amazing how sometimes I have to stop and be like, man, neurodivergence, like when you are neurodivergent, it really do be affecting everything. Oh my god. Because I don't feel I experience classic grief in the same exact way as maybe it is portrayed and talked about. But when I imagine like using this deck for, you know, like if someone you love passes, I've tried to use this deck in that way, and it didn't feel like it was hitting on that. It feels a little bit more like a personal journey, which probably is exactly what it's meant for. Now that I'm saying that out loud, like a personal journey through grief. Anyway, oh my gosh, Krista, get to the card. Here's my card for this week. It is The Return of Lost Selves. And is it focused? Oh, there we go. Look at that golden egg. Oh my gosh. Pulling this card, today, I'm filming this on Tuesday. I tend to pull these on Monday, for whatever reason. That just is like, to me, makes sense as like the restart of the week, so that's when I pull it. And reading through the entry and thinking on this card, it just really brought back this thought I've been having of, or this feeling, I guess, I feel like I've been working through for years now, with late diagnosis of, oh my gosh, like I don't really even know if I have a strong sense of self. Do I feel like it's better from like step one? Absolutely. Like, again, like it's been a few years now, and so not to say that I feel like I'm totally at square one with that, but it's been an odd concept to think about and to work through. Again, I think maybe because I don't know that there really is this like solid definition of what a sense of self is. And I don't quite understand what it means. When someone has a strong sense of self, I don't think I quite understand what that means. And so, of course, that's going to hinder trying to think about what my personal sense of self is. But that to say, I think thinking on this card has started to help. Because for starters, it brings up the idea that maybe there isn't just this one core sense of self. It talks about that we are made up of many different selves. And I think that idea makes a lot more sense to me. However, is something that I do feel a little sensitive about, because with late diagnosis, I have gone through a huge majority of my life thus far so heavily masking, so heavily just wanting to fit in somewhere, that I have these personas I really can just switch on, just like that. And when I have been around like certain groups of people, it's like I was always able to feel myself switch into these personas because I so easily picked up on, this is how I'm going to be the most palatable. This is where I feel I can really add something to this group and thus fit in. And so I think, well, I feel like I know myself so much better than I did 4 or 5 years ago. I think this is the aspect of it that I'm still struggling with, of like this idea that we are multifaceted, but that multifacetedness brings up to mind to me really these like what felt like survival tactics for me, of like being a different person for different people and like camouflaging myself so well. And so now it's this thing of trying to reconcile of like, well, are those different personas, are some of them some of these facets of a sense of self? Are some of them not? Which is which? Are all of them just like not real, for lack of better words? That sounds so existential. I promise I'm not in some sort of existential crisis over this. It's just like a lot to think about, and I think that's something that I haven't really seen explained to a full extent, of the idea that how does this facetedness look on a late diagnosed neurodivergent person? Because I know that's a commonality of when you're going through life neurodivergent but you don't know it. So it's this thing of like, you know you're different from some of your peers in some ways, but you don't know why. And so it's like you just shift into these ways of being that, instead of being pointed out as like odd or strange by, you know, your neurotypical peers, it's like, oh, this is acceptable for us, so like this is how I'm gonna, or this is acceptable for them, so this is how I'm gonna be. Where was I going with that? I forget the beginning of my sentence. Because I think the thought I'm having is like, I think a lot of those personas, I have come to terms with the fact that that's not me. But then what are these multiple parts of myself? I don't know. I don't know if there's always words to put to that. I think this is something that it would be useful. If you happen to be watching this and are a neurotypical person, and if you're sitting there like, Krista, you are overthinking this, please let me know. Like, please do. Because I think this is something that it would be useful to hear from other neurodivergent people, but I think it's always useful too to like, at least for me, I love getting a neurotypical lens on things. Because that is also a thing I'm working through, of like, I thought I was neurotypical, so a lot of these things I think about and I like spend a lot of time processing, I thought everyone was doing that. And so I love getting that lens of like, no, this is just another like factor of that. Yeah, I don't know. I think the grief, let's go back to the grief, because the grief, I think that's been going on for me when I've come to this realization of that a lot of these personas, I know in those moments I'm like, this doesn't feel like myself. It never has, and it just doesn't. And so there is grief though of letting go of those ways of being, of like, but this mask I put on, people loved. They loved it, you know what I mean? Like, that's a hard thing to let go of, and to have the realization of like, I don't think that's me, when that is how I viewed myself for so long. There's grief that goes into that. That goes into, and I've talked about this before, of like grieving the way I was able to exist before any sort of neurodivergent diagnosis. Not to say that it was like a better way of existing. I don't feel it was at all because I didn't actually know myself. But, you know, it's undeniable to feel like sometimes being able to do that was just easier. It was just easier. I am entirely rambling. I feel like I say this every time with these videos, but this feels especially rambly and like I'm not really getting to much of a point. I'm gonna post it anyway. She says, not sure. I'm not ever sure though. I have this feeling every time, and it's always fine. It's always fine. But yeah, I guess. So that's a little bit about me. Just working through this thing of like, who am I? I'm kidding. Not to make light of that at all, but again, I don't want anyone to feel like, oh my god, Krista, what? Like, it's okay. It's okay. It's just this card. And like this deck in general has really been bringing up a lot of this for me, which again, I think is really interesting because it is a grief journey oracle. And I think I have such a literal definition of grief in my head that I never expected to work in the ways that it does. But it's been bringing up a lot of grief for me around here's a concise sentence to wrap up all those things. It's been bringing up a lot of grief for me around change when it comes to how I act and move in the world and how I view how I act and move in the world and how I view myself. It's like, it's a major shift that's been going on in the last few years. And, you know, there's a lot of grief that I always, like, I think there's going to be this endpoint to it, and I don't know that there necessarily is. I think it's going to be this ongoing journey, which I think maybe it is for everyone. I think, like, everyone's always changing and shifting. I think this, like, with a late diagnosis, it feels so big and so extreme, and, like, this, again, it's something that I've been working through for 5 years now. Like, that's a long time. And it's interesting to me because it's like waves of it. It comes and goes, and I'm just in one of those stages where that feeling is really present. It's really here. And I think for me, it's when other life changes are happening. And so if you watched my October wrap up, I got married this month, which physically, like, or lifestyle was no change. Like, we have been living in this house together for 3 years now. Like, there was no shift. And so I didn't really expect to feel anything around it. And I am choosing to change my last name and things of that sort, which I felt a little bit around, but I don't think I was, I think it's just the idea of change that is bringing some of this stuff up to me of, like, I need to circle back around to some healing that needs to be done around sense of self and how much that has shifted over the last few years, but also just even the last few weeks, and how it's always shifting and changing. And also, I think some grief around that my brain craves, again, a solid definition of what that means, what that looks like, how it's quote-unquote supposed to be experienced, and needing to grieve the fact that, like, that's not available. Like, that doesn't exist. It's not available. If you think otherwise, I'd love to know, though. But, from what I understand, it's different for everyone. So, that was a ramble and a half. Oh my gosh. So, should we talk about some decks that have been helping me with this? I think so, because again, this has been like my card of the week. It's the central theme I'm working through. So, you know, as example, this being my card this week, this whole week I'm focusing my readings Other than like my daily draws, I'm focusing all my other readings that I do or don't do, depends on the day, around this return of the lost selves. And so using this deck, I have noticed that I've really gravitated towards certain other decks that feel like they fulfill whatever the theme is of that week. They feel like they consistently fit basically the vibe of what this deck is trying to give off. So let's start with oracles. I've got 3 here. The main one I've been using though is the Iris Oracle, and I've talked about this one within this series, but sometimes I like to talk about these as if maybe this is the first one you're seeing of this, because it might be. I don't know. For some reason, the Iris Oracle to me is a neurodivergent healing deck. That is not at all how it is marketed, is not at all why it says it was created. This is my feeling 100% on it. This is just how it shows up for me. And yeah, so anytime I'm doing specific work around like something I am noticing that is very centralized around like the late diagnosis process, I'm always reaching for this, the Iris Oracle. Shall I show you some cards? I don't know. I think it's just another one where the themes that come up, I think also just, I don't know, something about the art style to me feels very like how I imagine the inside of my brain might look. I don't know. And I like the titles on it that don't always exactly give away what the meaning is. Like, I really always get into the book with this one. The things that come up in the book, just, that's how, at least when I am receiving a message from this deck, again, 100% like this is my interpretation, it really always feels like it's speaking to something of that sort. Of course, we have to put the lens on again that being a neurodivergent person, of course, affects literally every way I move through the world. So, of course, I'm gonna pick up on these things, but I just find that particularly, that's always where this deck lands. Like, I guess to say that, you know, the fact that I am neurodivergent, though, isn't always, like, at the forefront of my brain, because it's just me, it's just how I exist. So it's not always at the forefront. I find that this deck really pushes it to the forefront of, like, hey, remember this? And, yeah, I just find it really, really helpful for these sorts of questions. So the Iris Oracle. Love that. The other Oracle deck, did I say 3? I'm trying to, yeah, 3. The Blooming Lovelies Oracle. She still doesn't have a tie. I don't know. This is just how it's existing now. I don't know. I just love how wacky this is. This one I really particularly like using when I feel like I am having a hard time around these sorts of topics, or when I do what I was sort of doing at the beginning of this video of really like trying to think and get to the bottom of an idea that there is no bottom to. This really gets me out of my head, this deck, and so I find it really helpful in that way. And also just, I love the messages. I love the things that come across with this deck. And again, the artwork, kind of similar to the Iris Oracle a little bit, like just inside of brain vibes. I love it. So, Blooming Lovelies Oracle. And the last Oracle, probably the one I use the least necessarily for this specifically, but still gets used, or I have been using it for, there's a squirrel in my bird feeder, rats. They always eat all my birdseed. With the Into the Lonely Woods, I have been using this with it. It is the I'm Here oracle. This one feels a little bit more like, if I'm feeling really sensitive, this is the one I'm gonna use. It feels like, it's just really nice. But I still think it's really nice, still constructive. Which honestly, now that I say those words out loud, I feel like every hug deck is constructive. Because sometimes we really need hugs. But this one feels to me like it's not strictly here to like give me a hug. It's also here to be like, and try this. How about that? So yeah, really like this one. As you can see, there's also kind of a color scheme going on here. I really like getting a lot of color in with these kinds of topics. I don't know, it's just something I noticed that I just always tend to lean into a lot of color. All right, and then I also have 3 tarot decks that I've been sort of bouncing in between. The one I've been using the most though, as of late, since I got it, is the Sassy Dragons Tarot. This is the Not Safe for Work edition. Oh, wait. Here's the other one. The Classic edition. I've mostly been using the Classic edition. I don't know. I think because this sort of work for me also entails a lot of inner child work. So maybe that's why I lean towards this, because otherwise I don't feel I have like a preference between the two. I really like both, but the Classic edition is what I've been using for this topic. And I don't know. It's just been the vibe lately. I think again, because it feels a little bit like getting into inner child work. I think this works for that reason, because the illustrations, but it's got a lot of color. I really love that it has the messages right on the card. So it's not really like working my brain more than it has already been working. Because again, I often have to catch myself when I am trying to, like I said, think to the bottom of a bottomless idea. So especially this paired with the Blooming Lovelies, it's like, it's a little bit of a brain break too. Because you're just reading what's on those cards. You're not pulling out guidebooks. So I've really been loving this lately, and so this one is what I've been using the most, I have to say. With the work coming up this time, but I've also been using the new Playful Heart. Love this. And this is self-explanatory, I feel. Real great inner child feels with this one. The artwork is like kind of the same to the first 2 oracles, where it's got this like childlike quality to it that is really helpful for me with this topic. It's got a lot of color. I find you can really get a little bit lost in the pictures for this with this deck to uncover the meaning. Yeah, I guess that's all I have to say on that. It's a classic for this kind of work. I love it. Playful Heart. Last but not least, this feels more like it goes with the I'm Here oracle. It's the Unicorn's Journey Tarot. This one I really like to pull out if I am in that space of like just feeling really sensitive with this work. I'm pulling out the Unicorn's Journey. And it's for, I mean, am I gonna say this every time I talk about this deck? Yes, because it's completely just my favorite aspect of it, and it makes it different from anything else I have. It's the self-worth message in the guidebook. So if I'm feeling really, really sensitive, I'm pulling an I'm Here card, followed by a Unicorn's Journey, and I pretty much just, I read the self-worth message, and I love it. And it's like this, because then when I'm journaling about it, I got the stickers Did we all get the stickers? I think we all got the stickers. So I'm able to like take the stickers and add that onto my page, and sometimes I'll even go, I got the children's book, the storybook with this, so if I'm really feeling like, once I'm done with the reading, I'll even like read the storybook. I love it so much. The story is so good. I have a copy here, and I actually was able to catalog a copy for our library, so the kids have also been loving it. They love it. So yeah, when I'm feeling real sensitive, this is the one. This is the one. I love it so much. So, those are the decks I've been kind of playing around with this topic. It's a big topic. I don't think did I really hit on anything in this video? I don't know. I have no advice other than maybe if you have these decks and like you're feeling something similar, try them. I don't know. I feel like usually I have some sort of like message with these. I don't have one this time, but other than like, if you are feeling this way, same. You're not the only one, I guess. It's an odd thing. It's an odd thing to like feel this sort of grief over so intensely over like, I existed my whole life thinking I was one way, and it turns out I'm it has this whole other reason. But it's also really rewarding to work through that, I guess is to say. If this seemed really like doom and gloom, I did not mean that at all. And not to even like discount, it's hard. It's hard to work through these things. And I have had a hard time working through these things, but it's like when you have these moments of clarity on it, it feels so good. It feels so good to feel like I'm finally really getting to know myself. So, yeah, I think that's all I have today. Eek! I get so nervous posting these. So yeah, other than that, I hope you're having a great day so far, and I'll see you again very soon.